Saint Elizabeth was probably more spiritually advanced than Saint Therese. So, she has another experience. This is what we call ecstasy. Sitting in the chapel at school, I think before school. Kneeling alone in the quiet school chapel, a great force came down on top of my head that stopped my brain and all its functions. Sound familiar? I could not move my mind. A superior force, strong as steel but light as a cloud, had overpowered it. It felt as if giant hands were holding my mind in a vice. I looked upward, a little over my head, to see a shaft of light a few feet before me. It seems a wide ray of this light had come down and penetrated my mind with a force that held it immobile. This condition may have lasted no more than 1 or 2 minutes. After that, the force gradually lessened and things eventually returned to normal. Afterward, my mind remained stunned. It did not get back to its usual form for a full day. When I could think about it, my first question concerned God within. Where had it been during those moments? I had not experienced its familiar presence or could find any connection with it and the brilliant light. At the time, I had no answer for this. If there is any problem with such an experience, it is that it ruins one's appetite for anything else or anything less. Compared to this, all experiences of God's presence, love, joy, you name it, is sheer aridity. I took for granted I had experienced a foretaste of a state down the road, most probably reserved for heaven, since such a condition was obviously not compatible with continued life on earth. So the fact that her mind was held forcibly, she was able to use later to discern kind of where she was on the spiritual journey, because this is what you call ecstasy, and later it happens less and less forcibly. She starts, because of all of these giving up various foods and maybe not eating enough, one of her trips to the doctor, they take a blood test, and it turns out, at least according to the results of the blood test, maybe they were accurate, maybe she says they were the results of someone else because the doctor was obviously incompetent and maybe had switched up the papers. She had been diagnosed with anemia, and the doctor calls her mom and says, "What the heck are you doing? I can't believe a woman in your class, social class, would allow your child to have this type of disease." So she makes an appointment, the mom does, with Father Columbanus, her spiritual director, and the ride to see Father was one of doom and gloom. Her entrance into Carmel had been instantly put on hold because now she's sick. And she tells Father, "I don't know what happened." He says, I didn't give you permission to stop eating anything." And she breaks down crying, and has snot running down her nose, and she's covering her face, and she realizes she doesn't have a handkerchief, and she feels a handkerchief thrust into her hand, and he says, "I want you to use it." And then, so she blows her nose, folds up the handkerchief, very small, puts it in her pocket so she can take it home, wash it before giving it back to him. And he says, "Listen, I have a plan. Here's a book. It's the rule and constitution of the Discalced Carmelite Order of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. You will keep the rule because, as we say, keep the rule and the rule will keep you." So she was thrilled. She could begin before entering Carmel to keep the Carmelite rule. And he says, "So what were you giving up anyway?" "Cookies, eat those. Pie, eat that." In other words, eat everything. And here, for whatever reason, it still baffles me. When she sent me this, she sent me a post-it note that I haven't removed. It says, "A lovely picture of her when she was 17 years old, looking rather studious as she's trying to get into Carmel." Obviously, this wasn't ego or any part of self, as far as I'm concerned, that caused her to write this note to me, a lovely picture. I can only imagine that maybe she wanted me to use this picture publicly. I don't know, that's probably wrong, but I can't figure it out. Why would she write a lovely picture next to herself and then send me the book? Maybe you have ideas. Okay, she's 17, and her entrance is put off after school starts. She's already gotten her diploma. She already passed her exams, but she has to go to her senior year in high school. Obviously very unmotivated, feeling dejected. She calls Father Columbanus, and he says, "Where are you?" And she says, "At home." And he says, "What? I thought you were already in the monastery." She explains to him what happened, and he says, "Okay," hangs up the phone, calls Reverend Mother, has a talk with her. A few minutes later, Reverend Mother calls Bernadette and says, "We have rescheduled your entrance date. You don't have to wait until next summer. You can come in on January 2nd. That unbidden, he had gone to bat for me, Father Columbanus. Well, my gratitude would know no end. From beginning to end, he had been my sole ally." So, the school principal didn't send the transcripts, didn't lift a finger to help Bernadette get into the monastery. But anyway, she gets in. And before she goes in, she has a final meeting with Father Columbanus, and she says, she asks him, "Why did you go to bat for me?" And he says, "I knew you were about to experience the big one, the big dark night, that is, entrance into the unitive state, soon," because he had been calculating this. You know, the first time it was 2 hours, and then it happened sooner and it lasted longer, then it happened sooner and it lasted longer, and he knew that it was going to happen very soon, and he wanted her to be in the monastery when this happened. For sure. So, but she says, from what she's experienced, for sure what I'm experiencing now is the big night. Father says, "No, not yet." "How so?" "You are not there yet." "What's missing? What else? Or what more has to happen?" And he says, "When it happens to you, you will know it. You will remember that I told you so, and you will take heart." And that turned out to be true. Reflecting on Father Columbanus and kind of why he was maybe always so serious, but always very sincere, never putting on false airs. At one point I thought maybe God had robbed him of the joys of the unitive state, the outcome of the big night. It would be just like God to do a thing like that. So maybe that was it. That's what kept him so humble and a bit sad, but I really don't know. So, she says, I would have liked to take my book on Elizabeth of the Trinity. I didn't even ask if I could. She was only allowed to bring a toothbrush, her rosary, her Bible, and like one other thing. I already knew it like the back of my hand, and they probably had a copy anyway, in the monastery, that is. And then her big day of entering the monastery arrives, and she wakes up, and she's happy to realize that she's not feeling any joy. High excitement can put the mind in a daze, so you go about things almost mechanically. Such a condition would not have allowed me to savor the depth and true joy in this still center of my being. After all, it wasn't just my big day, it was our big day. If I couldn't go through it fully aware of this profound oneness, then I might as well not go through it at all. So she arrives at the monastery with her parents. She kneels at the entrance to the cloister with a candle and a little kind of card, her script, where she officially asks permission to enter, and enters, gives a big hug to all the sisters, leaves her parents behind, door closes forever, and a duck born out of water in a desert, say, knows from birth he is not home, yet he cannot figure out what happened. The day he sees a far-off pond, however, something in him responds, and he sets out to investigate. The closer he gets, the more certain